My name is Angela Cox, and I'm the program manager here at the Beaufort Digital Corridor. Just want to go over a few announcements today before we get started with today's presentation. First, I do want to thank everyone for attending the Lunch and Learn today. We're really delighted to have you with us and hope that you leave with valuable insights and ideas that can propel your startup journey forward. Want to mention our Lunch and Learns events are catered to a wide audience who are interested in technology and startup world. So we always invite tech professionals, entrepreneurs, business and marketing professionals, college students, and their instructors. And our Lunch and Learn happens every third Wednesday of the month, always at noon. So mark your calendars and bring a friend with you next time. Want to go over some upcoming monthly events that we have. So tomorrow we're really excited to have Tech Connect. We are meeting at Shell Ring Ale Works at 5:30 p.m. Tech Connect is our monthly evening networking event. We've started highlighting our members. So tomorrow we're going to be joined by Travis Taborik. He's a B2B SaaS content marketing specialist, and he's going to share with us some information about his content writing and AI prompt engineering services. So it's going to be really exciting. Also, I want to put on everyone's radar that we are gearing up for our 4th annual Techstars Startup Weekend. Woo!
Yay!
So excited to have this again. It's one of Jess's favorite events that we do, and I'm really excited for it too. Techstars Startup Weekend is a creative and collaborative 3-day educational event where anyone can develop and pitch new startup ideas. So it's all about pitching, business model creation, prototyping, designing, and market validation, and it's all done in a friendly and supportive environment. Our Techstars is going to be taking place March 21st through the 23rd, and we'll have our registration page live very soon. So keep an eye out for that and save the date. And then finally, I'm honored to introduce our speaker today, Herbert L. Drayton III. As the founder and managing partner of Highmark Capital, Herbert is at the forefront of investing in artificial intelligence startups led by underrepresented groups, including women, veterans, and minority entrepreneurs. In today's talk, he's going to offer invaluable insights on navigating the venture capital landscape. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Drayton, a visionary forging the future of innovation.
Thank you, Angela. Good afternoon, I think. So I asked Jess to pass out those index cards just to help me a little bit. So what I'd like for you to do is, if there was a question that you wanted to ask a VC, an angel, high net worth person about investing in your venture, and you've been afraid to ask it in public, could you write that down on that card for me? Or if while I'm going through this presentation, a question comes to mind that you want answered, just write it on that card. Because what I've found is that folks walk away with more unanswered questions than they do answered. So this is an opportunity for you to help me guide the presentation that I'll share with you here today. As Angela said, I've been, Highmark Capital, we invest in with primarily artificial intelligence startups. We didn't start there. The goal when we launched Herbert Capital was simply to invest in startups within the state of South Carolina, within that demographic, and we found that there weren't a lot of venture-ready firms in the state of South Carolina, so narrowed the focus a bit to artificial intelligence. But as I tell folks, I will have every entrepreneur in the state of South Carolina and beyond deserves 15 minutes of my time. So I'll have conversations with anyone about your venture. Let's just some definitions here real quick. The venture capital space, they focus on startups and innovative businesses. They invest in exchange for equity. What's important here is startups is key, but a lot of folks misunderstand the term innovation. Innovation to me means something different than innovation would mean to you. And what I would ask you to do, if you decide to have a conversation with a VC or an angel, make sure that you can clearly differentiate what your product is and the value that you will bring to your target audience. A lot of founders get caught up in the excitement of what they're doing as opposed to the impact that they're going to have on the businesses that they're targeting. So I would ask you to make sure that you're crystal clear on who that target audience is and what problem is you're trying to solve for that audience. And if in describing the problem that you're solving, you have many conjunctions in there, you're probably off. We do this and this and this and this. Try to narrow it to one or two, or if you're clear on who you're talking to, that VC or that angel, make sure it aligns with what their investment strategies are. Along those lines, I spent a lot of time when I was raising funds for Highmark Capital talking to folks who didn't care about what I was doing, and also talking to folks where there was misalignment, and also folks who didn't have resources to deploy. So in your outreach to folks, one of the simplest questions you can ask is, are you deploying capital at this point? Because if they're not deploying capital at this point, then it's just going to be a fishing expedition, and it's going to frustrate you in an incredible way, all right? So just make sure that they're deploying capital. Why venture capital matters? If we can move venture dollars into startups and early stage companies in the state of South Carolina, that's a fuel for them to create jobs, create a reputation for the state and for the region. So it's important that we lean into them. For the entrepreneurs, you get the capital, strategic guidance, mentorship, and expanded network. That second bullet point is important. I would recommend that if a VC simply wants to write you a check, that's probably not the person you want to invest in you. I'll get into the types of the three of the companies that we invested in last year and give you some insight as how we're working with them. But I have never made an I've never written a check and then said, I'll see you next quarter. Because they're early stage companies. I've had 18 companies. I know a little bit about what I'm doing and 6 of those companies were, 6 of those companies were startups that we did. So I know a little bit about it. So when you're talking to folks, number one, are you deploying capital? And then you find out what they're going to do beyond writing a check. With all the companies that I've invested in, I know that I can make a call to a strategic client, a first client, or a distribution channel so that we can help them hit velocity as quickly as possible. And most VCs will tell you this, but I don't know if they have a methodology to get you there. They want to get their money back as quickly as they possibly can. And typically it's 3x, 5x. I've had many conversations with folks, and they would say, well, yes, I'll take 50,000, I'll take 100,000. I said, well, you don't understand. I need to get 3x my money back. And they would say, no. And they said, no, that's okay. And I said, well, let me make sure you understand what I'm telling you. If I give you $1, you have to give me 3 back. Best case scenario, if I give you $1, I need to get 5 back. And I've had a couple of people tell me that I was a loan shark for conducting business that way. But, I don't break fingers and, cut off toes and stuff like that. So that's loan shark space, right? So the ecosystem, just some idea to give you guys some thoughts on how this is all set up. So the entrepreneurs, I've been there, you're there. The VC firms, I'll jump to this a little bit. An overview of the regional activity. If you Google VCs in the state of South Carolina, you're going to get about 24 companies, right? If you VC angels in the state of South Carolina, you're going to get about a dozen. So there wasn't a need for me to provide an exhaustive list of folks. And I would encourage you, don't just use Google, maybe use ChatGPT and ask it for those companies. ChatGPT seems to bring back much better results than general Google. Angel investors. So VC, let me go back here. VC firms will typically look to make that commitment for equity The good ones, as I said, they provide strategic guidance, directions, make connections, and that type of stuff. Ideally, you want a VC firm that's going to write you a check, a six-figure check, all right? Because that's going to move the needle for you. Angels will do, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 check. If you've got a specific need that you're going to use that money for, or if that's going to get you to the next stage in that angel network, it makes sense to do that. But the due diligence that you're going to go through with a VC firm and an angel, it's about the same. So you might as well position yourself to go here if necessary. And I would never approach any of these folks to solve a short-term cash flow need. Make sure you're crystal clear why you're doing it. Because if you're going to get $100,000 you're going to spend in 6 months, it doesn't make sense. Because then they're going to be hounding you, trying to figure out how they're going to get their money back. Limited partners, the LPs typically invest in VC firms, okay? So you may know some folks out here who have an interest in investing. They may not want to invest in you, but they may want to invest in a VC firm and let smarter people work with startups to help them get their money back. And again, here, some of the ones that are out there, I think if you do the search, I'm not going to show up. Good Growth Capital may or may not show up. But the ones that will show up, Venture South is going to show up, Charleston Angel Partners is going to show up. But even for them, the question is the same when you approach them. Are you deploying capital? With the companies that I've invested in, I've told the founders, I don't want you worrying about finding investments. I'll do that. Just focus on the product. Just focus on positioning so that when we're ready to go to market, you're crystal clear on what you need to do, and you're not taking phishing calls from VCs and angels or people who may haven't. They say they have an interest, but they really don't. They're just fishing to get good stories to tell, and those I would encourage you to stay away from. Talk about the investment process, and Angela, we'll make this deck available to everyone, right? Okay, so while it may appear that I'm going to gloss over this, if any of these blocks you want additional information, just ask. So the deal sourcing. As I mentioned, when I started my firm, my goal was really to invest in startups led by, minorities, women, LGBTQ, that type of stuff, right? But every LP that I spoke with, they would ask the question, well, how are you sourcing your deals? And I just said, well, they're coming to me. But what I discovered is a lot of the companies that came to me or that were referred to me, they were, I would call them Main Street businesses. I think in the state, for every 100 companies that are venture ready, ready for a six-figure check, there's probably 500 companies to 1,000 companies that are ready for a check size of $20,000 or less. Now, those folks who are ready for that check size of $20,000 or less, again, they're Main Street businesses, so they're not going to be companies that will generate $1 million in revenue, right? But they are companies that could generate $100,000 to $500,000 for that solo entrepreneur, solopreneur, or folks with 2 or 3 shops, right? And why that's important, and why it frustrates me that we don't have more resources available for those Main Street businesses, because you could take a $20,000 investment and put it into a Main Street businesses with some scaffolding to make sure that they have all their systems in place and those other key to core things to a business, right? That $20,000 could probably produce about $125,000, $200,000 a year for 10 years for that entrepreneur and their family. And in a lot of cases, that's life-changing. Assuming that, most times I will see that those Main Street businesses, their cost is not so high. So you take a $150,000 business and their cost may be $25,000, $30,000. Now you've got someone who's going to make consistently over $100,000 a year for the next 10 years. So that's a little bit frustrating for me, but in deal sourcing, that's what I found. The initial evaluation, for me, it's what is the problem that you're trying to solve? How are you going to solve that problem? And then who's your first customer? it's that simple. All the other stuff is noise. When people start talking about, well, we invest in founders, and I can't cuss because this is being recorded, but that's just BS, right? So I wouldn't pay any attention to that. No matter who you are, if you're solving a real life problem, and your solution actually will solve that problem, and you know who your first customer is, or you've got a distribution channel, that's really all you need to be crystal clear and be able to communicate that. And in saying that, when I talk to folks about their pitch decks or their pitch, if you will, I always encourage them to do two things to help them with that. Well, three things. One, what is your favorite song? Listen to your favorite song, and there's a reason why those things stick in the lyrics stick in your head, right? There's something about it that you like. Your pitch needs to be you need to create a favorite song for the person you want to invest in your company. The second thing I tell folks is pay attention to your favorite commercial. I mean, those things grab your attention in less than 90 seconds. So that means that you don't have to throw up on people to get your point across. I've seen so many entrepreneurs, they just start to throw up on folks. And then the last thing I encourage folks to do is take a one-flight trip in an elevator and record yourself talking to someone you want to interest in your company. And you're not trying to sell them, you're just trying to get them interested in it. And if you can't get it across in a succinct way, driving from, taking the elevator from floor 1 to floor 2, you got a whole lot more work to do in that regard. All right, the due diligence. Once we get to the due diligence point, it's very rare that I find entrepreneurs who know how to put together a good set of financials. It's just very rare. And it's also very rare where there's an entrepreneur that understands how to put together a go-to-market strategy or a sales strategy. Just because you've got 5,000 followers on Facebook doesn't mean you understand social media marketing, right? So I don't expect that from folks, but there are a lot of folks out there that expect you to have that. Folks, and I'm talking about my colleagues in the investment world, they will ask you things like, well, do you have a data room? How many have heard that term, data room? No? That means a centralized location with all your documents in them. And you can do that. And really, the only thing I encourage you to do is make sure you've got your pitch deck out there and you update it frequently. And if you've got a bookkeeper or an accountant, get your bookkeeper or accountant to put together some projected financials. And if you're not on QuickBooks, pay the $39 a month to get on QuickBooks and use QuickBooks to create a set of financials for you. Okay? Because they're going to ask for it, and you just need to show that you were prepared to answer that question, right? Term sheets. I have found that if you get to the point where you get a term sheet, that's a legal document, if you will, right? It's like a letter of intent to invest, memorandum of understanding. Most entrepreneurs have never seen a term sheet. So you're gonna want to have a lawyer look at it. Most times they're not binding, but it just states, Angela, yes, I'm interested in your business. I plan to make a $100,000 investment. Here's when we think we'll have all the documents ready for you to sign. I mean, that's it. So if someone offers you a term sheet, take the term sheet, look at it. I encourage you to look at as many of those that are offered to you, because then you'll get a sense of what's good and what's bad and what you really need to be prepared for. The investment and support, again, as I said in an earlier slide, you don't want just money. That's called a bank loan. Okay, you don't want just money. Make sure that they're going to provide guidance for you. And then that last piece, so everyone talks about, my colleagues, so well, what is your exit strategy? And quite frankly, I think it's an unfair question. If they understand your business, they should actually help you prepare for what the exit looks like. All the founders that I'm engaged with right now, they're SaaS companies, And I ask us, this is sort of the acid test for me, because they're all startups, and multiples in startups right now go anywhere from 5 to 16. So a simple question is, if we get this company generating $2 million in revenue within 24 to 36 months, and we get an offer of $10 million from someone to buy it, would you sell? What is the right answer to that question?
Yes. It depends on the company.
I need to know, what's the right answer?
It really depends on the company.
Depends? Depends?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. The answer is yes. Well, and here's why. You're part of a startup, 0 revenues, and I just said to you, in 24 to 36 months, this thing that's making $0, someone will want to buy it for $10 million. There's no other answer. and I will guarantee you that you will have other ideas. And if you create something that you could sell, even if you could, the smallest transaction we did was $650,000, right? But the company was just killing me, right? So I took the 650, and then guess what? I didn't have the headache anymore. I didn't have the developers to worry about or anything, right? Make sure as you're building something, companies are not children. You don't have to raise them to maturity and send them off to college, right? You just get the value out of it that you can unlock and move forward. I was in a matchmaking session with entrepreneurs and investors, and this guy asked me, we've had 6 transactions, exits, and the guy asked me, he says, out of all the companies that you've owned, what is the one mistake that you've made that you regret? And I told him I made the mistake with all the companies that I owned. Anybody want to take a guess at what that is?
Held on too long.
You must have heard me. Yeah. Held on to them all too long. Because I got comfortable, I got connected to the people, because we had, when we at our peak, we had I had about 125 employees. So you get to know people, you get to know the kids, and then you realize, oh, the decision I'm making, it's going to affect his 7-year-old, because now he's going to work for another company. He may not want to do it. And you just can't do it. You got to decouple from all that stuff as you're going through this journey, this entrepreneurial journey. So what do VCs look for? I've mentioned these. The market opportunity, large and growing market. As I said, I held on to companies too long. We would, if you think of your company, you put it on a bell curve, right? You want to sell on the left side of that curve, okay? Always. If you can project that, if you sit down and say, like with all the companies we have, we know the first 100 targets, all right? If we are wildly successful and the first 25 to 30 say yes, and we engage, I'm having these conversations at that point. Because, we're creating a story to tell, right? If we've identified our top 100 and the first 25, 30 have said yes, we're creating a story so that we could sell. Because we do have limited resources. The market's this big, our go-to-market is this size, so all of this is still left out here, right? And we won't have the resources to tackle those. So I'm having that conversation about how we get out, or at least how I get out. Now, I've done 2 transactions where my partners, we negotiated employment agreements for them. So that may be something that you look at as well. When you do the exit, is there an opportunity for you to stay on board? And most times when there's an exit, the acquirer wants you to stay on in some capacity, unless you're toxic. And none of you guys strike me as toxic people, right? Unique value proposition, strong team, scalability and potential. So the strong team piece. If you're a solopreneur and you sit down and list your competencies, what is it that you bring to the table that makes this company special? It's like doing a gap analysis, right? What are you missing? I thought I understood marketing. And we would actually bring in marketing firms to work with us. And maybe in the first 5 questions they would ask, well, Herb, what do you want to accomplish in with a marketing plan, which I thought was a dumbass question, right? I mean, why? What do we want marketing for? Anybody can tell me? So clients, growth, revenue enhancement. So it's a dumb question, right? And then they would ask me questions like, well, tell me some ways that you want to do that. And I would answer. And then literally, they were like in full-blown consultants mode, asking me all the questions to get the answers. And then they would come back and bring me a plan based on what I just said to them. And guess what happened every time? Didn't work. So when folks ask me that question, sort of I'd say the second half when we own those companies, when that question came to me, I said, well, if I knew the answers to these questions, I wouldn't be having this conversation. I want X number of customers or increase. I want X number of revenue increase. Tell me how to do it. That pushes all the accountability back on them. So I realized that I'm not a marketing person, right? So I don't do it. Same thing with all the companies that I have. I've had a number of the entrepreneurs come to me and say, well, so-and-so wants to invest in a company. I said, well, when did you become a fundraiser? They're not fundraisers. Tell them to talk to me. I'm your lead investor. I will be happy to have the conversation with them. They will, I've got one very energetic founder. She wants to set up the website and do the logo, and I give some leeway. Go ahead and do the logo. But then when they start talking about doing the website, I said, no, that's not your thing. I just need you to focus on the product. What I do is I bring in a marketing team. They sit down and we do that. It's not what they do. And I encourage you guys to figure out what is it that you do very well and just do that thing and find other people who do it well with you. Now, that also means that you can't have a scarcity mentality and think that you have to always own everything. I agree that you should stay at 51% preferred shares, meaning it can't be diluted. And you can give away 49% of the company all day long, but until you start making money or someone wants to buy it, the value of it is zero. So don't get caught up in your fancy spreadsheets that show that you're going to make $100 million. Just, you can give it away as long as it's dilutive. When you get an investor to come in, they're going to be diluted anyway, but you keep your preferred majority position in the company. So the funding stages. I would say that, well, all the companies we talk with, they're pre-seed. So we're first money in. We know the idea. We know all the mechanics of the business. So we know that we're pre-seed. I'm preparing them for the seed round, meaning we're going to have a product. We're going to have our first customer in tow. We're going to have at least one other investor ready to go. And then I'm pushing seed. Series A, I mean, you're humming along, you're chugging along, and the example I'll use here is, you've got a logistics company. Everybody familiar with SC Ports? Okay, you're chugging along, and then you get this call from your logistics company. You get this call from SC Ports saying, "Hey, we'd like to talk to you about your company doing this work for us." You go and you have the initial conversation, and then you realize that it's a $5 million deal. All right, $5 million a year, and they want to lock you in for 4 or 5 years. And you look at what you have to do to get ramped up for that. You've got a couple of choices. All right, so $5 million deal per year, 5 years means what's the value of that contract? Okay, great. All right. Thanks for inviting the math person. This is great. Okay. I was struggling. Yeah. So the deal is $25 million. So that's what you're shopping, right? But you look and you're a staff of 5, and you've got to add bodies, you've got to add systems to manage it. That's when you want to go for your Series A round, because you've got a $25 million company. In addition to what you got, even if you're doing $300,000, you got a $25.3 million company, but you need $1.5 million to get up to speed because you got to hire people, systems. You may need some, vehicles and fleets and that type of stuff. That's when you go for your Series A round. Okay. Series B and beyond. I would encourage you that if you create something, you never get here, because everybody in this room, you probably got 4 or 5 ideas running around in your head, right? And the pain that you go through asking for resources now to do the thing you want to do today, if you do this well and you get to this point, or even at the seed, you will have the resources you need to do those other things that you're thinking about. So please keep that in mind. Let me give you another example. My workout partner, I met him in 1991. We've been working out together since then. He's 71 years old. We work out 5 days a week together, and the other 2 days I just decided not to hang out with him. All right, so I'm going to be alone. He came to me. I was a director of IT operations for Roper St. Francis Healthcare in Charleston. And he said he wanted me to come take a look at his business. And I remember going and I talked to his man. It's an occupational medicine and primary care facility. I talked to his practice manager, and he comes to the gym the next day very excited. What do you think? What do you think? I looked at him and said, man, do you really want to know? And he says, yes, that's why I asked you to come. And I said, they scare the hell out of me, because they had these titles with really no functional background. So they were just there kind of floating in the wind. And that business was doing about $900,000 a year. And within 3 years, I got it to $6 million. And he came to me and said, and we'd have these conversations in the gym. And he says, I want to make you a partner in the company. I said, well, what does that mean? So I want to give you 51% of the company in recognition of everything I've done for him, right? So the growth, what I did in that business, and here's where I'm going with this. Pay attention to the things that you're doing along the way, because most times right now you're going to have a 10x mindset, but we get caught up in doing 2x things. And here's what I mean. So the things that I did to grow that company from 900,000 to 6 million, once we got to 6 million, I went back to doing the 2x things. I went back to just, now we built this thing to 6 million, I want to run it, all right? But I had run the $900,000 company and created a strategy to grow it, all right? Those are the things that I should have kept doing. But once we got to 6 million, I went back to doing the things that I was doing before I figured out a plan to grow the business. So there's a book called 10X is Better Than 2X. I encourage you to read that book, because when I was reading it, I was like, well, damn, that's me. I did that. And then in another instance, I had a company in Sumter. Got there, they were doing $1 million a month in revenue. And within 45 days, I got them to 1.4 million a month. And I remember the founder and CEO coming to me, and he wanted me to be the CEO of the company, because I was just there on a 6-month consulting basis. And I remember going home before Christmas, coming back, and because I told him I wanted to think about it over the holidays. And I got there, and he must have told everybody in the facility, when Mr. Drayton pulls up, I want to know. Because by the time I got in the building, in my office, he was there. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, man, I don't think this is what I want to do. I mean, because I was living in Charleston in Sumter, and he said, come on, man, we're getting a Starbucks. So that was the closing pitch to me. Come for a startup. But that was just another example. But even in that case, I believe that if I had gone there, I wasn't smart enough to understand that the 10x things that I did to get them to add an additional $400,000 in revenue, I would have forgotten and gone back to doing the 2x stuff. So keep that in mind. Any questions? Anything written on cards? Got stuff written on cards? Oh, let me get the cards. These are like my TV commercials. I did? Oh, okay. All right. Any? Still think? Okay. Let's see if we get on cards. Oh, okay, these are good questions. I want to share with you the 3 investments we made last year. So one is called Haruki. I mentioned this one to Angela earlier. It's an AI mental health platform to support military and first responders. So in this case, so there are many mental health apps out there, right? Betterment and all that type of stuff, right? But most times, and I think this is a flaw in our society, we treat mental health as an afterthought. It's like when someone gets diabetes, then we look at insulin and all that type of stuff. But what we do with chronic diseases, in the prevention of chronic diseases, we don't do with mental health. We tell folks, here are the things that you need to do to not become a diabetic. Exercise, watch your diet, reduce your stress, that type of stuff, right? We don't do that with mental health. So with Haruki, and this came out of a technology out of a federally funded research and development firm, so we license the technology to market it. What Haruki does is, I'll use the military as the example. So when military folks are being deployed and redeployed, there are changes in the dynamics of the family. So when you're deployed, everything changes. If you're married, let's say with 3 kids, and now you're leaving your spouse alone, you're leaving them in a very, very bad state, right? So what are the things that are going to happen to that relationship when that service member is deployed? And I'll use a man's perspective, right? If I'm here in Beaufort, stationed at the air station, I call my wife, she always answers, we have conversations, good. What am I picking up when I come home, blah, 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 everything's cool. Now, I'm in Germany, and I call my wife, and she's rushing me off the phone. And me, being the guy that I am, well, she talked to me all the time when I called her before. Why can't she talk to me now? Well, she must be having an affair. That's where the head goes, right? But what I don't realize as a service member is, I was 50-50 in that enterprise we call a family. I stopped at the store to pick up foods. I helped pick up the kids on the way home. I took the kids to soccer and all that. You forget all that type of stuff, right? So Haruki is designed to help them understand the dynamics of the relationships using scenarios to help them understand these are the things that could happen. And then also, I've been deployed for 36 months, didn't take any leave to come home. I come back. Where's my head? My head's still 36 months ago, right? I come back home, I'm the boss again. No, kids are 3 years older, your spouse is 3 years older, 3 years wiser, also hardened a little bit, and she's got her routine, and you can't just come in. And, the Army asked them to create this to help reduce the divorce rate of deployed and redeployed soldiers, sailors, and airmen. And they did the math and realized that, well, what is going on and what can we do? So they created that platform. So we got it, and we decided that we would expand it to first responders. There's really no sort of resilience, restoration, regulation type training for our first responders. When you see somebody being shot, that's the first time you see them being shot. And now you got to deal with that. But what Haruki does is we look at the dynamics of these scenarios that first responders may face. We present it to them, and then we help them develop coping strategies and techniques to handle those things when they do happen. So you've got sort of a baseline when you're going into it. Next is RFP. So there's $23 billion in set-aside contracts annually from the federal government, county governments, right? And only about 2 to 4 billion are actually allocated to minorities, women, LGBTQ, service-disabled vets, right? So you got this gap. So about, let's say 4 billion of it actually gets out the door, but 20 billion of it is not. And there are 2 reasons for that. The people who qualify for them, they don't know how to search for them. And also the people who qualify them, they don't know how to write the technical responses to the RFPs. So what Nexus does is it actually goes out and searches for these set-aside contracts, ingests it into the system, looks at the profiles of the companies that may qualify for them, and says, hey, Herb, we found a paving contract carve out. It's worth, $400,000. We think that this is something that you qualify for. Would you like for us to prepare a response to this RFP? And then what this system does is it actually prepares the response to the RFP in an editable format. So now I've got it, and all I have to do is submit it. All right? And then finally, FOIA Assist. FOIA stands for Freedom of Information Act. This group called MITRE created this platform in conjunction with the Defense Logistics Agency. The number of FOIA requests right now, you as citizens of the United States, you can request to see any contract that the federal government has a relationship with a contractor. You have rights to those. But when you request those contracts, they have to go through and redact information. A lot of that's a manual process right now. And there are 37 standard redactions in any contract that the federal government, county, or city government releases to the public. What this platform does is it goes through and identifies those 37 standard redactions, and it points them out to you. It says, hey, Herb, these are the things, personal information, costing data, all those things. And then I'd go through and just say, yes, accept, accept, accept. And if there are 5 more things that I want to make sure we redact as well, with machine learning, we can tell the system also do these 5 things, and it actually learns to do that as well. So all of these are SaaS platforms. All of these platforms, I'm projecting they'll be at $1 million or more in revenue within 12 to 18 months. All right, so let me look at some of the questions. What is the sweet spot amount to aim for when seeking venture funding? So that depends on the firm. If they're writing $50,000 checks, it doesn't make sense for you to ask for $500,000. And I think one of the flaws in what people ask for is a lot of entrepreneurs will say they are raising $1 million. But you may have a firm that only writes $50,000 checks. So what the firm is going to believe, well, they're raising $1 million, I can only write 50, all right? My recommendation is that you leave that amount out and you wait, you get to the point where you have a conversation. Don't even put that in your deck, but everybody will tell you to put that in your deck. But my recommendation is find out the check sizes that firm is writing and tailor your deck to that particular firm. And the other thing I will say here is research the venture firms. If you're going to if you're going to reach out to me, based on what I've shared with you, how many in this room would qualify for an investment from my firm? Raise your hands. If you would qualify. No, just on demographics alone. Demographics alone. How many of you would qualify? Yeah. So I invest in every demographic except white guys. All right? So, if you're a white guy, there's no need to reach out to me and say, hey, I have this, innovative, groundbreaking. I'm going to look and say, well, we only invest in women, LGBT, blah, 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 right? The other thing I would suggest is that if you're going to reach out to a firm, most of them have their portfolios on their page. Take the time to go through the portfolios. I think Good Growth Capital has like 60 companies on their site, but if you're going to ask them for money, make sure that your product is not a direct competitor or something that they've already invested in, because it's a conflict of interest. And also make sure that they haven't invested in something that's similar to what you're doing, unless you've got a way to enhance one of the investments that they've made. If a company is doing A, B, C, and D in a space you're in, but you're doing E, F, and G, that's the conversation you want to have with them, right? Hey, I noticed you have this company, they're doing this, but we're doing this, and we believe we can enhance what they're doing. Can we have a phone call? The last thing I will say related to this is make sure that as you're reaching out to folks, you don't throw up on them in an email. Right? You're better off creating a landing page and telling folks, here's who I am, here's the problem I'm solving, here's the market. And then if you want to learn more, click the link. And there's 2 reasons for doing that. You don't annoy people, and then the second thing is you can track engagement. I mean, it's hard to track open emails, but you can track the number of clicks, visits to that landing page site. So I encourage you to do that as well. And let's see, can you explain limited partners? Does your firm offer LP opportunities? Yeah, we're always accepting money. You know, I'm very careful that I know what the ceiling is. You know, folks will run around saying they're raising 100 million, 50 million. I wouldn't know how to deploy that kind of money, quite frankly. I'll write six-figure checks, and I'll lean into, I know that I'll probably do a dozen investments. We've got these 3 we did last year. We're going to do 2 more this year. I'll pause, and then next year we'll ramp it up again. We've got the pipeline. It's not going anywhere. You know, yeah, if anybody wants to write a check, yes, just call me. You know, we'll take the money. All right. And I think, okay, so just call to action. I talked about your pitch deck. Accelerators and mentors, engage where you can, but make sure the mentors understand your business. I mean, if they don't understand your business, they're really not going to add any value to what you're doing. Investors, Buford, I mean, the fact that we've got the digital quarter here, you know, just hang out like the annoying person in the community and just ask these folks if they're looking for investors, and be prepared to tell them the check size that you'll write, and then just have the conversation. Then I'd say pull the folks, you know, Jess and these folks in to talk about how you make the commitment to these folks. And I would say never ever give money for salaries. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I've done it. Never ever give for salaries, but there has to be a clear use of the funds. You want to finish a feature in the app. You've got a customer coming on board, that type of stuff. And then next steps, you know, just do stuff like this. Okay, just do stuff like this. This is free, all right? And I think that's it. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So, we were talking about the FOIA Assist app. Is it okay to ask like uncomfortable questions?
Yeah.
Because,
Ask me uncomfortable questions?
well, yeah, about the,
Yes.
the project specifically.
Yeah.
How like reliable the machine learning algorithms in like redaction process, and if something goes wrong, whose head it is? Of the person who's like, you know, confirmed the document to be redacted, or the person who provided the product, you know, so.
So with the FOIA Assist, we call it a decision support tool. So there always has to be human intervention. What FOIA Assist does, it speeds up the identification of the things that should be redacted. And those 37 standard redactions, they're codified. So that's a part of the algorithm. So if it says your name shouldn't be there, your social security number shouldn't be there,
Right.
your costing data shouldn't be there. So it goes through and finds those things and it highlights it, right? Let's say P1 would be one that we would pick, right? So it'd say P1 means we've found some personal identifiable information, your home address. So it'll highlight that in a block, and then inside it'll have P1, and it's okay, yes, that's it. You can accept that, and then you move on. So it's
It would be like the responsibility is usually on the employee.
ultimately it requires human intervention. But right now what's happening is folks are, you know, they're kind of like creating queries and going through scanning and doing, but this, I mean, we've run like 500-page contracts through it. It takes like 30 seconds to do it. Yeah.
So, and also the legislation around AI is always changing.
Mhm.
How does that influence the VC process, especially that, like, you know, you might be invested into a company that tomorrow will be illegal to even exist?
Are you a lawyer?
No.
Okay, all
I'm an
right.
artist.
You know, so I've worked with one, a lawyer who wants to be a VC, and what I've shared with her is that you can't de-risk yourself and be successful as an entrepreneur or venture capital. So you have to understand that there are acceptable risks. You have to understand that there will be legislation that may create some headwinds for you. But as I said earlier, if you know the problem that you're trying to solve, your solution solves it, and you've got your first 100 customers, race to get those 100 customers, and then get out. And you can set Google alerts for things like pending legislation, or you can just, you know, just look at the bills that are going to be coming out of Congress, right? Or at the state level. I think around AI, everything's going to come from the Fed level, like SEC and those type folks. Any other questions?
Anyone online with any questions?
Oh. I'm not responsible for those folks. All right. Well, good. Well, thank y'all very much.
Yes, thank
All right. All right. Yeah.